Tonight's story is a quiet journey through history, made for you to simply listen to as you drift off to sleep. Hawaii is well known for its beautiful beaches, warm sunshine, and peaceful island scenery. But tonight, we'll go a little deeper and slowly explore its long and fascinating history. First, turn the volume down a little. Then simply lie back, close your eyes, and make yourself comfortable. There is no need to follow every word. Just let the story drift quietly in the background, and if you fall asleep along the way, that is perfectly fine. And now, let tonight's story slowly begin. Tonight, we will slowly trace the long history of the Hawaiian Islands, floating in the middle of the vast Pacific Ocean. When people hear the name Hawaii, many may picture blue seas, white waves, palm trees, warm breezes, and quiet sunsets. But the history of these islands is not made up only of peaceful scenery. It contains the courage of people who crossed the open ocean by relying on the stars. It contains the wisdom of people who built their lives upon volcanic land. There was a king who united the islands, and there was a kingdom that conducted diplomacy with nations around the world. And there were epidemics, wars, immigration, the sugar industry, the overthrow of the monarchy, annexation by the United States, the attack on Pearl Harbor, statehood, and the long journey to reclaim language and culture. Tonight, let us look at each of these things without hurrying. You do not need to remember everything. It is all right if dates and names pass by like quiet waves. Simply consider how the islands floating in the middle of the Pacific accumulated layer after layer of time and became the Hawaii we know today. Just allow yourself to feel that flow, slowly. The Hawaiian Islands are part of a long chain of volcanic islands stretching across the North Pacific. Over a vast span of time, the islands were created by volcanic activity beneath the ocean floor. Older islands have been worn down by wind, rain, and waves, while on the younger islands, volcanoes continue to create new land even now. The main islands familiar to us are arranged from northwest to southeast: Kauai, Oahu, Molokai, Lanai, Maui, Kaho'olawe, and the island of Hawaii. The island of Hawaii, the largest of them, is also called the Big Island to distinguish it from the islands as a whole. But when we try to understand Hawaiian history, the first thing to keep in mind is how very far these islands are from any continent. North America lies to the east, and Asia lies to the west. Yet in either direction, thousands of kilometers of ocean stretch away. This was an age without airplanes, steamships, or metal navigational instruments. The first people to reach these distant islands were Polynesian voyagers who understood the Pacific Ocean in extraordinary depth. Modern archaeological research offers a range of dates for when people first began to settle permanently in Hawaii. Older accounts sometimes said that they arrived around 1,500 years ago. More recent studies, using modern dating methods, have suggested that substantial settlement began sometime between around 940 and 1200 CE. Scholars differ over the dates, but one thing is certain. Hawaii's first inhabitants were not people who had merely drifted there by chance. They understood the ocean as a road. The stars in the sky, the position of the sun, the movement of the moon, the direction of the wind, ocean currents, the way waves crossed one another, the shape of clouds, and the species and flight paths of birds. Reading all of these changes in nature, They guided enormous canoes across the sea. Quietly imagine a navigator on the ocean at night, watching a star rise above the horizon. No land is visible ahead. And yet that person knows that the ocean is not an empty place. Waves have direction. Birds have places to return to. And clouds can take shapes that reveal the presence of an island. The ocean was not a wall, but a road connecting island to island. The first voyagers did not come empty-handed. They carried plants and animals in their canoes, everything they would need to live in a new land. Taro, sweet potatoes, yams, breadfruit, bananas, coconuts, and sugarcane, and pigs, dogs, chickens, and other animals. Small seedlings and seeds, limited supplies of food, water, tools, and family members. They must have protected all of these things as they traveled aboard their rocking vessels. When they finally saw the outline of an island after a long voyage, what appeared before their eyes? Shores of black lava, deep valleys, mountains wet with rain, the cries of seabirds, high peaks hidden in clouds. It did not immediately become a rich paradise. The people had to learn the forests, understand the flow of water, recognize the seasons, cultivate the soil, and discover the fishing grounds. In traditional Hawaiian society, land was not understood simply as property, but as something that gave life to the people. The Hawaiian word aina means land. The word is deeply connected to a word meaning to eat. People receive food from the land, care for the land, and pass it on to the next generation. This relationship was understood not as one-sided use, but as a relationship of mutual support. A system of land divisions known as ahupua'a also developed, treating the natural world from the mountains to the sea as a single connected whole. In many cases, an ahupua'a was a long, narrow area extending from a mountain ridge through a valley and down to the coast. Forests stood in the uplands, providing timber and plants. Farmland lay on the slopes and in the valleys, where water was directed into fields to grow taro. Along the coast were fishing grounds, where people could obtain fish, seaweed, shellfish, and other foods. The land was organized so that a single region included the gifts of the mountains, the fields, and the sea. Rivers and irrigation channels were the lifeblood of the community. Who could use the water, when, and in what way? In which season should fish be caught, and during which periods should they be left alone? What should be gathered from the forest, and what should be left behind? Such rules not only helped stabilize daily life, they were also a form of wisdom that prevented nature from being exhausted. Taro was especially important as a staple food of the Hawaiian people. In Hawaiian, taro is called kalo. Kalo grown in flooded fields was steamed, carefully pounded, and mixed with water to make poi. Poi supported the everyday table. Its soft texture and gentle sourness may also have been a taste that connected land and family. In Hawaiian genealogical accounts of creation, there is a story linking kalo with the first being to be born. It expresses the sense that human beings and plants are related like distant members of the same family. Food did more than satisfy hunger. It also connected ancestors, land, gods, and the people living in the present. Along the shore, fish were caught in many different ways: hooks, nets, traps, and spears. Fish ponds were also built by enclosing parts of the coastline with stone walls and using the rise and fall of the tides. Some ponds were designed so that small fish could enter from the sea, but would have difficulty leaving after they had grown. People observed the movement of the tides and the habits of fish, seeking to obtain food by working with the movement of the sea rather than destroying the sea itself. Canoes were involved in travel, fishing, trade, warfare, and ceremony. There were small canoes carved from a single tree, and large voyaging canoes made by joining two hulls together. Selecting a tree, cutting it down, transporting it, shaping it, and binding the parts together required the cooperation of many people. Prayers and ceremonies were also performed before a canoe was launched. A vessel was not merely a tool, it was a precious presence that carried people across the sea, supported families, and connected one island to another. Homes were structures called hale, made with wooden frames covered in layers of grass and leaves. A single family might use several buildings, each with a different purpose: a place to sleep, a place to eat, and a place to work. The warm climate meant that thick walls and large fireplaces were unnecessary, but the buildings were designed to keep out wind and rain. Kapa cloth, made from bark, was used for clothing and bedding. The soft inner bark of a tree was beaten, spread thin, layered, dried, and decorated with patterns made from plant dyes. Even a single piece of cloth that looked simple contained long hours of labor and careful handwork. Feathered cloaks and helmets were symbols of chiefs of especially high rank. Tiny feathers from birds were gathered little by little to create vivid red and yellow designs. How much effort must have been required before such a piece was complete? It was clothing, but it also expressed genealogy, authority, and sacredness. People passed down history through songs and chants. Before writing was used in Hawaii, genealogies, battles, land boundaries, stories of the gods, and family memories were all handed down through the human voice. It was extremely important to remember them accurately and recite them correctly. Which ancestors a person descended from, to whom a certain piece of land had been entrusted over time. Such knowledge was deeply connected to the order of society. Memory did not exist only inside the human mind. The names of mountains, the names of valleys, the names of winds, and the names of rains. Places themselves remembered the stories. Traditional Hawaiian society contained differences of rank and role. Chiefs of high rank were called ali'i, people with specialized knowledge of religion, medicine, navigation, construction, agriculture, and other fields were called kahuna. The many people who supported the life of the community through farming, fishing, and other work were called maka'i nana. Some people also had responsibility for managing land, water, labor, and harvests. One of the important systems supporting this society was kapu. The word kapu can mean forbidden, sacred, or set apart. Who was permitted to enter a certain place? Who was allowed to eat a particular food? What activities were permitted in each season? How should one behave in the presence of a chief? Kapu was both a system of religious rules and a system for managing society and its resources. At the same time, punishments for violations could be severe, and great inequalities of rank existed. The Hawaiian religious world contained many gods and spiritual beings. Kane, Ku, Lono, and Kanaloa are known as major gods. Stories of Pele, the goddess associated with volcanoes and fire, have also been passed down widely. Violent eruptions, red lava flowing across the land, and the trembling of the ground. Faced with volcanic forces that no human power could stop, people must have sensed a sacred power within them. People also believed in protective beings called Almakua, which watched over families and lineages. They could be associated with many forms, including sharks, owls, lizards, and plants. Nature was not silent matter, existing outside humanity. It was something that formed relationships with people, carried memory, and received respect. Hawaii has legends of small people known as the Menehune. They are said to have lived deep in the forests or in hidden valleys, building stone walls, roads, fish ponds, and other works during the night. Elikoko Fish Pond on Kauai is sometimes called the Menehune Fish Pond, and traditions remain concerning its construction. In the stories, the Menehune work with astonishing speed and complete enormous tasks before dawn. Here, however, it is important to distinguish legend from archaeological fact. Some travel materials and books about ancient civilizations present theories that the Menehune were members of an advanced civilization that existed before the Polynesians, even connecting them to lost continents or Atlantis. But there is no widely accepted archaeological evidence supporting such theories. Current research explains the settlement and cultural development of Hawaii through the voyages of people from the Polynesian world and the long history that followed on the islands. The stories of the Menehune are therefore best understood as part of Hawaii's rich body of tradition, rather than as established ancient history. But that does not mean that a legend has no value. When people looked upon old stone walls and fish ponds, they may have marveled at the skill involved and imagined workers with abilities beyond those of ordinary human beings. Perhaps the stories contain respect for the builders of the past. On a quiet night, unseen by anyone, people carried stones, and by morning, a great pond had been completed. The very fact that such a story survived across generations is itself part of Hawaiian culture. As time passed, the population of the islands grew, and political groups became larger. On the islands of Hawaii, Maui, Oahu, Kauai, and elsewhere, powerful chiefs each established their own influence. Chiefs sometimes formed alliances through marriage, and at other times fought over land and authority. Armies crossed valleys and travelled over channels between the islands. A chief who won a battle distributed newly acquired lands among lower-ranking chiefs who pledged loyalty to him. But rule was never permanently stable. Succession disputes arose, alliances changed, and former friends sometimes became enemies. In this way, island kingdoms and chiefdoms appeared and changed over long stretches of time. Oral genealogies preserve the names of many rulers, including Liloa and Umi'aliloa. Historical fact and tradition overlap in some of these accounts, but the stories were also important to later kings as a means of demonstrating their legitimacy. High rank was not determined by personal ability alone. From which ancestors had a person been born? To which genealogical lines were both the father and the mother connected? That ancestry shaped political authority and sacred status. In the latter half of the 18th century, a powerful chief emerged on the island of Hawaii. He was the man who would later be known as Kamehameha I. There are several theories concerning the year of his birth. One tradition says that, as a child, he was threatened by a rival chief and raised in another place for his own protection. As Kamehameha grew, his physical ability, strength as a warrior, and political judgment gradually attracted supporters. But one more great change was needed before he could unite the islands. That change was sustained contact with Europeans. In January of 1778, a fleet led by the British navigator James Cook reached the Hawaiian Islands. This is regarded as the first recorded period of sustained contact between Europeans and the Hawaiian people. Cook named the islands the Sandwich Islands. The name honored the Earl of Sandwich, who supported the British Navy at the time. Of course, every place on the islands already had its own name. The fact that an outsider gave the islands a new name did not erase the names or history that had existed before. One of the first places where Cook's ships made contact was Waimea on Kauai. How might the people have felt when they saw enormous sailing ships approaching the shore? Tall masts unlike those of large Hawaiian canoes, tools made of metal, unfamiliar clothing, words. There must have been both amazement and caution aboard the ships and on the land. At first, the two sides exchanged food and goods. Iron was an extremely valuable material to the Hawaiian people. Nails and pieces of metal could be reshaped into tools and weapons. The sailors, meanwhile, sought water, pigs, fruit, vegetables, and other supplies. This contact marked the beginning of new trade. At the same time, it was also the beginning of changes that could not be reversed. One famous account of Cook's arrival says that he was identified with Lono, the god of fertility and peace. This explanation has often been given because the arrival of Cook's ships coincided with the Makahiki season associated with Lono. Scholars continue to debate, however, whether the Hawaiian people literally believed that Cook himself was a god. If the encounter is reduced to a simple story in which islanders mistook a foreigner for a god, we risk losing sight of the complex politics and judgment involved at the time. The Hawaiian people observed the sailors before them, traded with them, sometimes came into conflict with them, and tried to understand them in their own way. The following year, in 1779, Cook's fleet entered Kealakekua Bay on the island of Hawaii. After departing once, the ships returned to the bay because one of them had been damaged. By then, tensions had arisen that were different from the welcome at the beginning. During a dispute over a stolen boat, Cook attempted to take a powerful chief hostage. A clash occurred on the shore, and on February 14, 1779, Cook was killed. This incident was not simply the result of a misunderstanding. It grew from the combination of trade, authority, responses to theft, armed force, ritual, and mistrust on both sides. Foreign ships continued to visit Hawaii after Cook's death. Fur trading vessels, merchant ships, whaling ships, and warships. The islands became an important port of call for vessels crossing the Pacific. Contact with foreign ships also changed the way wars were fought in Hawaii. Guns, gunpowder, cannons, and metal weapons, and Western-style ships. Kamehameha expanded his power on the island of Hawaii, while making use of foreign advisors and weapons. John Young and Isaac Davis are known as two foreigners who assisted him. The two men remained in Hawaii, advised him on the use of weapons and ships, and gained the king's trust. But Kamehameha's success cannot be explained by firearms alone. He had the political ability to manage land, form alliances, absorb rival chiefs into his side, and create order after battle. In 1790, the Battle of Kepaniwai was fought in Iao Valley on Maui. Intense fighting continued in the narrow valley, and many lives are said to have been lost. In 1795, an important battle in the Wars of Unification took place at Nu'uanu on Oahu. Kamehameha's forces drove the army of Oahu back into the mountains. Through this battle, Kamehameha came to control many of the major islands, including Hawaii, Maui, Molokai, and Oahu. Kauai and Niihau, however, did not submit immediately. Kamehameha attempted expeditions against Kauai, but storms, epidemics, and other difficulties prevented them from succeeding. Finally, in 1810, King Kaumuali'i of Kauai accepted Kamehameha's rule through negotiation. In this way, the unification of the Hawaiian Islands was completed not only through military force, but also through political agreement. After unification, Kamehameha I tried to establish order across the islands. The long period of warfare had ended, and chiefs from different islands had to be brought together within a single kingdom. He expanded trade with foreign countries while preserving traditional land systems and the authority of chiefs. Sandalwood, an aromatic wood, became an important product for the Chinese market. Foreign ships came to the islands and received timber and food in exchange for imported goods. As trade expanded, however, chiefs sometimes demanded more goods, placing heavy labor burdens on ordinary people. A famous story from Kamehameha's reign is connected to a law known as Mamala Hoe Kanawai. According to tradition, Kamehameha once became trapped during a conflict and was attacked by fishermen. From that experience came a principle of protection, that the elderly, women, and children should be able to sleep safely by the roadside. The spirit of that principle is carried forward in the modern constitution of the state of Hawaii. Kamehameha is remembered as a powerful conqueror, but also as a ruler who maintained peace after unification. Kamehameha I died in 1819. The location where his remains were buried is still not publicly known. The king's bones were believed to possess sacred power, and trusted attendants are said to have hidden them in a secret place. The king's death marked the end of an era, and immediately afterward, the old system that had supported Hawaiian religion and society underwent a profound transformation. Kamehameha I was succeeded by his son, Liholiho, Kamehameha II. But the king did not make every decision alone. Ka'ahumanu, one of Kamehameha I's most powerful wives, held a strong position resembling that of a co-ruler. In 1819, the king and high-ranking women publicly broke an important kapu, forbidding men and women from eating together in the same place. The people are said to have cried out, "I Noah, free eating." This was not merely a change in dining custom. The kapu system itself, which had supported religion and society for generations, was abolished by a decision of the royal family. This change was begun by Hawaiian leaders themselves, before Christian missionaries arrived. Some old temples were destroyed, and images of the gods were burned.
Not everyone agreed with the decision, however. Fighting also broke out against forces seeking to preserve the traditional religion.
A change in official belief did not suddenly erase the old world from people's hearts in a single day. Even after the formal system had been abolished, family memories, prayers connected to the land, and feelings toward Pele and the Aumakua remained in many forms. Great change was taking place on the surface of society, while beneath it, old and new continued to overlap. In 1820, the first group of Protestant missionaries arrived from the United States. Their purpose was to spread the teachings of the Bible. The missionaries formed relationships with the royal family and the chiefs, and established schools and churches. A system for writing the Hawaiian language was also gradually developed. Before that time, Hawaiian had a rich tradition of chants, songs, and stories, but it was not a language commonly written with an alphabet in everyday life. Missionaries and Hawaiian scholars organized its sounds and created a written form suitable for printing. Before long, Hawaiian language Bibles, newspapers, laws, letters, and textbooks were being printed. The Hawaiian kingdom of the 19th century is said to have achieved an extremely high rate of literacy. The people did not simply receive the new writing system passively. They used Hawaiian to record enormous amounts of their own history, genealogies, stories, and political opinions. Today, old Hawaiian language newspapers are precious records for understanding society during the time of the kingdom. But missionary influence had another side as well. From the standpoint of Christian values, hula, traditional rituals, clothing, and customs involving sexuality and family life were sometimes viewed negatively. In 1830, hula was restricted under Kahumanu. Even so, hula never disappeared completely. People danced in private and continued to preserve their stories through song and movement. One of the greatest tragedies brought by foreign contact was disease. The Hawaiian people had no immunity to infectious diseases that had circulated for centuries in Europe and America. Smallpox, measles, whooping cough, influenza, tuberculosis, and other illnesses repeatedly swept across the islands. Estimates of the population before contact vary widely, but it is clear that the native Hawaiian population declined sharply throughout the 19th century. In a single community, many people could disappear within a short period. Families lost loved ones, fewer people remained to care for farmland, and fewer people were left to inherit and transmit tradition. It was a loss that numbers alone could not express. In the kingdom's census of 1850, the Hawaiian population was recorded at a little over 80,000. By the end of the 19th century, it had fallen even further. Kings and chiefs tried to advance measures in medicine and public health. Medical institutions such as the Queen's Hospital were also established. But medicine at the time had its limits, and stopping epidemics was not easy. From the 1860s onward, people diagnosed with Hansen's disease were forcibly isolated at Kalaupapa on the northern coast of Molokai. Many were separated from their families and could not return home for a very long time. The history of Kalaupapa tells of fear of disease and the pain of isolation imposed in the name of public health. These quiet sorrows are also inscribed within Hawaii's beautiful landscapes. Kamehameha II traveled to Britain with Queen Kamamalu, but both contracted measles in London and died in 1824. His younger brother, Kauikeaouli, then took the throne as Kamehameha III. During his long reign, the Hawaiian kingdom changed greatly, from a traditional chiefly system into a modern state with written laws and a constitution. In an age when foreign powers were expanding into the Pacific, it was believed that preserving independence required a form of government that the nations of the world would recognize and understand. A Declaration of Rights was issued in 1839, and the first constitution was established in 1840. The king's authority was defined by law, and a legislature and court system were gradually organized. The Hawaiian kingdom was not simply a colony administered by foreigners. It functioned as a sovereign state, with its own king, government, laws, flag, currency, postal system, and diplomatic relations. It entered into treaties and diplomatic relations with many countries, including the United States, Britain, France, and Japan. In 1843, Britain and France jointly recognized the independence of the Hawaiian Kingdom. Lakuokoa, Independence Day, commemorating that recognition, became a national holiday of the kingdom. A small island nation in the Pacific had persuaded the great powers of the world to recognize it as an independent state. Shortly before that, in 1843, the Hawaiian Kingdom experienced a temporary seizure of its sovereignty by a British naval officer. The event is known as the Paulet Affair. Captain George Paulet of the British Navy claimed that the rights of British subjects had been violated and placed pressure on Kamehameha III. To avoid bloodshed, the king temporarily surrendered governing authority while formally protesting the action. But Paulet's action was not the official policy of the British government, and several months later, another British naval commander restored the kingdom's sovereignty. When his authority was restored, Kamehameha III is said to have spoken a famous phrase, "The life of the land is preserved in righteousness." This idea later became the motto of the state of Hawaii. Here, the word land means more than soil alone. It includes the nation, the community, and the lives of the people who live there. For the kingdom to endure, military strength alone would not be enough. Just government and international trust were also necessary. Perhaps that hope was contained in the words, "The year 1843, when independence was restored, was a year of pride for the Hawaiian Kingdom." At the same time, however, the growing foreign population and changes in the economy made disputes over land increasingly serious. In traditional Hawaii, land was not private property in the modern sense, something an individual could buy and sell with complete freedom. The king, chiefs, and ordinary residents all used land while holding different rights and responsibilities. Forest and merchants and plantation owners, however, wanted clearly defined legal ownership of land. It was also believed that, to protect the kingdom from foreign seizure, the land system needed to be changed into a form that Western nations would understand. The major land reform carried out in 1848 was the Great Mahele. Crown lands, government lands, and chiefly lands were divided into categories, and the idea of privately owned land spread. Ordinary residents were also given a path to apply for rights to the small plots they had cultivated. But applications required deadlines, surveys, paperwork, fees, and other procedures. For people unfamiliar with writing or formal institutions, or those living in remote areas, the process was not simple. As a result, many native Hawaiians were unable to secure enough land as legally recognized property. The reform was partly intended to protect the kingdom as a modern state, but over the long term, it also contributed to the concentration and loss of land. In time, foreign-owned companies and plantation operators came to own or lease vast areas. A way of life once connected from the mountains to the sea was divided into smaller pieces by boundary lines and deeds. During the first half of the 19th century, many whaling ships called at Hawaiian ports. Lahaina and Honolulu, in particular, flourished as places where sailors could obtain food and water, repair their ships, and rest. Sailors who had spent months or even years at sea entered the towns all at once. Taverns, shops, and lodging houses increased, and a cash economy spread. At the same time, conflicts of values arose among sailors, missionaries, the kingdom's government, and local residents. The prosperity created by whaling did not last forever. After peaking in the 1850s, the industry declined because of the use of petroleum, the falling number of whales, and other changes. Around the same time, sugar began to grow rapidly as the center of the Hawaiian economy. The first permanent commercial sugar plantation is said to have begun on Kauai in 1835. A warm climate, volcanic soil, and a position in the Pacific relatively close to the American market, sugar became a crop capable of producing great profits. Plantations required vast areas of land, enormous quantities of water, and large numbers of workers. Irrigation channels were carried across mountains, and dry land was transformed into sugarcane fields. The landscape, economy, and politics of the islands were all changed by sugar. Sugar plantation owners wanted to export their sugar to the American market on favorable terms. In 1875, the Hawaiian Kingdom and the United States entered into the Reciprocity Treaty. Hawaiian sugar could now be exported to the United States without tariffs, and the sugar industry expanded rapidly. Through a later supplementary agreement, the United States gained the right to use Pearl Harbor as a naval base. Economic ties deepened into military and political ties. When plantations lacked enough workers, their owners brought contract laborers from overseas. People came from China, Japan, Portugal, the Philippines, Korea, Puerto Rico, and many other places. Government-sponsored immigration from Japan began to increase substantially after 1885. After a long voyage, the newcomers began living in plantation camps on unfamiliar islands. They rose before dawn, cut sugarcane under intense sunlight, and endured strict rules and low wages. People with different languages, foods, and religions worked on the same plantations. From this experience, Hawaii's distinctive multi-ethnic society began to take shape. English, Hawaiian, Japanese, Chinese, Portuguese, and the many languages of the Philippines. As these languages blended together, a way of speaking, later known as Hawaiian Creole English, commonly called Pidgin, also developed. The Harvey's growth into a multi-ethnic society enriched its culture. Flavors from many different regions appeared together on the table. Rice, noodles, fish, pork, pickled foods, bread, beans, and fruit. Ways of celebrating, music, religious events, and family customs also overlapped. Many foods enjoyed today as Hawaiian cuisine reflect not only native Hawaiian culture, but also the history of the people who came together during the plantation era. But different peoples did not naturally become equal simply because they lived together. On plantations, living quarters were sometimes divided according to place of origin, and wages could differ between groups. Plantation owners took advantage of divisions among groups to make it harder for workers to unite. Even so, as time passed, workers began to organize across lines of language and origin, demanding better wages and working conditions. Large strikes occurred in the 20th century. The children of plantation workers attended school, and the next generation grew up speaking English and thinking of the islands as their home. Many of those who had arrived as immigrants eventually remained in Hawaii and built families there. As a result, Hawaii became a place where many regions of the Pacific met within a single island society. But we must not forget that, during this process of becoming multi-ethnic, native Hawaiian land and political power continued to weaken. The story of diversity and the story of loss existed within the same era. After Kamehameha III, Kamehameha IV and Kamehameha V succeeded to the throne. The kings tried to maintain relations with Britain, France, and other countries so that the kingdom would not depend too heavily on the United States alone. Kamehameha IV and Queen Emma devoted themselves to establishing a hospital to protect the health of the Hawaiian people. The grief of the royal couple after the death of their young prince was deeply shared by the people of the kingdom. With the death of Kamehameha V, the direct succession of the Kamehameha family came to an end. After that, kings were chosen by the legislature. Following the brief reign of King Lunalilo, David Kalakaua was elected king in 1874. Kalakaua is sometimes called the Merry Monarch. He sought to restore Hawaiian culture, which had been suppressed under missionary influence, to the public life of the kingdom. Hula and traditional chants were performed at his coronation and birthday celebrations. These were not merely forms of entertainment. They expressed the history and pride of the kingdom. Kalakaua is also known as a king who traveled around the world. He journeyed through the United States, Europe, and Asia, and also visited Japan. As he traveled, he sought to strengthen the diplomatic presence of the Hawaiian kingdom. During Kalakaua's reign, new technology and architecture entered Honolulu. Iolani Palace became a symbol of the kingdom's modernity. Technologies that were new for the time, including telephones and electric lighting, were installed there. Foreign diplomats, politicians of the kingdom, and citizens of many ethnic backgrounds gathered in the palace halls. The Hawaiian kingdom was neither a country that preserved only tradition, nor one that simply copied foreign institutions. It tried to survive as a modern nation in the world, while preserving Hawaiian kingship and culture. But the kingdom's economy depended heavily on sugar, and plantation owners had gained increasing political power. Many of them were wealthy residents of American or European ancestry. In 1887, backed by an armed militia, they forced King Kalakaua to sign a new constitution. This constitution is known as the Bayonet Constitution. The king's authority was sharply restricted, and property and income requirements were imposed on voting rights. Many native Hawaiians and Asian residents were excluded from, or restricted in, political participation. At the same time, some European and American residents who were not citizens were given a path to vote. The Constitution took the form of law, but it had not been created through free agreement. The sovereignty of the kingdom was gradually being eroded from within. In 1891, King Kalakaua died in San Francisco, where he had gone for his health. His sister Liliuokalani became queen of the Hawaiian kingdom. She is also known as a composer. Her famous song, Aloha Oe, spread around the world as a song of farewell. However, the song was not first composed after the overthrow of the kingdom. It was written in the 1870s, before she became queen. Knowing the history that followed, we may hear in its melody a farewell to the kingdom. But when the song was created, it was not a prophecy of the overthrow to come. By the time the queen ascended the throne, the Hawaiian economy was facing a crisis. Changes in the American tariff system weakened the special advantage once enjoyed by Hawaiian sugar. A growing number of plantation owners believed that annexation by the United States would benefit them economically. Many Hawaiian citizens, meanwhile, wanted to protect the independence of the kingdom and their own political rights. Queen Liliuokalani sought to establish a new constitution that would restore royal authority and the voting rights of citizens, including Native Hawaiians, that had been taken away by the Constitution of 1887. Many petitions had been presented to the Queen. Her ministers, however, feared a strong reaction from the opposition and did not support the plan. In response to the Queen's attempt to create a new constitution, a group of businessmen and politicians in Honolulu formed an organization known as the Committee of Safety. Its leading members included American and European sugar interests, descendants of missionaries, and figures in finance. They sought the Queen's removal and the establishment of a provisional government. John L. Stevens, the United States minister at the time, took a hostile position toward the kingdom's government. On January 16, 1893, Marines and sailors from the American warship USS Boston landed in Honolulu. Their stated purpose was to protect American lives and property, but their presence placed enormous military pressure on the Queen's side. On January 17th, the Committee of Safety declared the establishment of a provisional government. The Queen had armed forces capable of defending the kingdom. If fighting had broken out, blood might have been shed in the streets of Honolulu. Queen Liliuokalani temporarily yielded her authority to the superior military force of the United States, expecting the American government to investigate the situation and restore her to her lawful position. She did not voluntarily abdicate because she accepted the legitimacy of her opponents. In this way, the monarchy of the internationally recognized Hawaiian kingdom was overthrown. When news of the overthrow reached the United States, the administration of President Benjamin Harrison moved to advance a treaty of annexation. But the next president, Grover Cleveland, ordered an investigation into the circumstances of the overthrow. The investigation, conducted by James Blunt, strongly criticized the involvement of the American minister and the military. President Cleveland sought to restore the Queen. The provisional government, however, refused. Another investigation was conducted by the United States Congress, and it reached different conclusions about responsibility. In the end, the United States did not restore the Queen. In 1894, the leaders of the provisional government established the Republic of Hawaii. Sanford B. Dole became its president. The new government had not been created with the broad support of all residents. In 1895, an armed uprising seeking to restore the monarchy took place, but it failed. After weapons were discovered, Queen Liliuokalani was arrested and confined in a room at Iolani Palace. To protect the lives of her supporters, she was pressured into signing a formal document of abdication. Inside the palace, where balls and official ceremonies had once been held, the Queen spent her days under guard. In that quiet room, perhaps she could hear from a distance the sound of her kingdom being lost. The leaders of the Republic of Hawaii wanted annexation by the United States, but many native Hawaiians and supporters of the kingdom strongly opposed it. When a treaty of annexation with the United States was again debated in 1897, the Hawaiian people organized a massive petition against it. These documents are known as the Kue petitions. Kue means to oppose or resist. More than 20,000 signatures were gathered as organizers traveled throughout the islands. It is said that a very large proportion of native Hawaiian adults at the time seen the petitions. Representatives carried them to Washington. Because of the strength of the petitions, the necessary votes to ratify the Annexation Treaty could not be secured in the Senate. Annexation by treaty was stopped at that point. But in 1898, the Spanish-American War began. Hawaii's military position became even more important to the United States. The United States Congress passed the Newlands Resolution, a domestic joint resolution, rather than a treaty. President McKinley signed it on July 7, 1898. In August of that year, a ceremony marking the transfer of sovereignty was held. The flag of the Republic of Hawaii was lowered, and the American flag was raised. For those who opposed annexation, that scene marked the moment when they lost their country. The legal and historical meaning of Hawaii's annexation remains debated today. From the position of the United States government, the Newlands Resolution, and the institutions that followed, made Hawaii a territory of the United States. Those who seek Hawaiian independence argue that a domestic resolution of the United States Congress could not lawfully annex a separate sovereign nation. They emphasize that annexation by treaty failed, that American diplomats and military forces were involved in the overthrow of the kingdom, and that native Hawaiians organized a large petition opposing annexation. Many different positions exist in Hawaii today. Some accept the present reality of Hawaii as an American state, while seeking the restoration of native Hawaiian rights and culture. Some seek political recognition as an indigenous people within the federal system. Some argue that the Hawaiian kingdom continues to exist, or call for the restoration of an independent nation. There are differences of opinion even within each of these movements. So when we speak about Hawaiian history, annexation is not a single line describing an event that ended in the past. It is an ongoing question connected to land, politics, education, culture, and the identities of people living today. In 1900, the Hawaiian Organic Act established the government of the Territory of Hawaii. Sanford B. Dole was appointed the first territorial governor. The residents of Hawaii became American citizens, but they did not immediately receive the same political rights as residents of a state. They could not vote in presidential elections, and the delegate they sent to Congress did not have the same voting power as an ordinary member. During the territorial era, major sugar and pineapple companies exercised great power over land, transportation, banking, commerce, and politics. The most powerful group of companies was known as the Big Five: railways and ships that carried sugar from plantations to the ports, banks that lent money to the plantations, trading companies that handled their goods. Many different parts of the economy were connected through a small number of corporations. Honolulu grew into a modern city, with increasing numbers of streetcars, hotels, shops, newspapers, and schools. In 1901, the Moana Hotel opened in Waikiki. Waikiki would later become a tourist destination known around the world, but the coastline at that time looked different from the one we see today. Wetlands, fish ponds, and taro fields still remained in some areas. As canals were dug, land was filled, and hotels and roads were built, the landscape changed greatly. During the territorial period, Hawaii underwent a process of Americanization centered on the English language. A law enacted in 1896 made English the general language of instruction in public schools, and Hawaiian language education declined rapidly. Some people remembered being punished for speaking Hawaiian. More parents began using only English at home because they believed it would help their children's future. As a result, by the middle of the 20th century, very few people spoke Hawaiian as an everyday language. However, simply saying that Hawaiian was completely forbidden would overlook the more detailed history of the system. What matters is that schools and society came to lean overwhelmingly toward English, while the environment in which people could learn, work, and live in Hawaiian was lost. When a language weakens, the knowledge of the land and the stories stored within its words also become harder to transmit. Words for different kinds of rain, the name of a wind that blows through one particular valley, words describing the behavior of fish, the sounds and rhythms of genealogies and chants. Some things can be translated, but some feelings and meanings survive only in the original language. Even so, through families, churches, music, old newspapers, scholars, and cultural practitioners, the flame of the Hawaiian language did not go out. Though it grew small, it was carried into the next era. At the beginning of the 20th century, Hawaii became an important military base in America's Pacific strategy. Naval facilities at Pearl Harbor were expanded, and military bases were established across Oahu. At the same time, a movement seeking statehood began in Hawaii. The first statehood bill was introduced in Congress in 1919, but it did not pass. Some politicians on the mainland opposed statehood because Hawaii was far away, because it was a multi-ethnic society, and because it had a large population of Asian ancestry. The racial prejudice of that era also influenced their opposition. For the people of Hawaii, remaining a territory meant that they lacked full voting rights in the federal government that made decisions affecting their taxes and laws. Supporters of statehood sought full citizenship and political participation. At the same time, some Native Hawaiians placed greater importance on restoring the sovereignty of the kingdom than on becoming a state. There was no single opinion about Hawaii's future. While that debate continued, the morning of December 7th, 1941, arrived. In the quiet Sunday sky, the sound of aircraft drew closer. It was the attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese Navy. On December 7th, 1941, Japanese aircraft attacked Pearl Harbor and surrounding military installations on Oahu. Battleships, airfields, and harbor facilities were struck, and more than 2,300 American military personnel were killed. More than 1,100 people lost their lives aboard the battleship Arizona. The following day, the United States declared war on Japan, and entered the Second World War in full force. Martial law was imposed in Hawaii immediately after the attack. The military received broad authority, and curfews, controls over communications and the press, identification requirements, blackouts, and other measures were introduced. This condition continued until October 1944, becoming one of the longest periods of martial law in American history. At the time, Hawaii was home to a large Japanese-American population. Many were the children or grandchildren of immigrants who had come as plantation laborers, and they were American citizens born in Hawaii. After the attack, suspicion and discrimination toward people of Japanese ancestry intensified. On the west coast of the mainland, mass incarceration was carried out. In Hawaii as well, Buddhist priests, teachers, newspaper workers, community leaders, and others were detained and sent to camps. But because the Japanese American population was so large and so essential to society and the economy, the entire population in Hawaii was not incarcerated on the same scale as on the mainland. Even so, the fear of having one's loyalty questioned cast a shadow over the lives of many families. During the war, many people from Hawaii served in the United States military. Units made up of second-generation Japanese-American soldiers fought in Europe and elsewhere, suffering great losses while earning high praise. Their military service became one force that helped change prejudice directed against Japanese Americans. The Hawaiian Islands themselves, meanwhile, became something like an enormous military base. The number of soldiers increased rapidly, and roads, ports, airfields, and housing were expanded. Food and other supplies were controlled, and access to the coast was sometimes restricted. When the war ended in 1945, Hawaiian society changed greatly once again. Returning veterans pursued education and moved into new professions. Labor unions and a new generation of politicians challenged the power long held by plantation owners and the old political establishment. In the election of 1954, the structure of political power in Hawaii changed dramatically. People of Japanese, Chinese, Filipino, Native Hawaiian, and other backgrounds moved into the center of political life. The statehood movement also gathered greater momentum. A petition supporting statehood, with more than 100,000 signatures, was sent from Hawaii. After being blocked in Congress for decades, the question of statehood finally moved closer to becoming reality. In March 1959, the United States Congress passed the Hawaii Admission Act. President Eisenhower signed it, and a referendum was then held in Hawaii. An overwhelming majority of votes favored statehood. And on August 21, 1959, Hawaii became the 50th state of the United States. Bells rang in Honolulu, people waved flags, and celebrations were held. The long territorial era had ended, and the residents of Hawaii gained participation in presidential elections and voting representatives in Congress. Daniel Inouye became the first member of the House of Representatives elected from the new state, and later served for many years in the Senate. For many residents, statehood was the achievement of political equality. But here, too, there are different perspectives. For those who believe that the overthrow of 1893 and annexation of 1898 were illegitimate, the earlier question of sovereignty was not resolved simply by the statehood vote. Independence was not offered as an option on the ballot. The vote took place within a choice between becoming a state and remaining a territory. the memory of celebrating statehood, and the memory of mourning the lost kingdom. Both exist within Hawaii. After statehood, Hawaii's tourism industry expanded rapidly. The age of jet passenger travel began, and large numbers of visitors came from the American mainland, Japan, and elsewhere. High-rise hotels filled Waikiki, while roads, airports, shopping centers, and residential developments were built. Hawaiian music, hula, lei, surfing, and luau's spread around the world as images of Hawaii promoted to tourists. This created many jobs and sources of income. At the same time, culture was sometimes simplified into a product for visitors. Hula could be separated from meaningful chants and history, and seen only as a colorful dance. The word aloha could be detached from deep human relationships and responsibilities, and used as a convenient greeting or advertising phrase. Land prices rose for hotels and vacation homes, making it harder for people born there to continue living there. Development changed access to water and the coastline. Tourism became a major pillar of Hawaii's economy, but it also left the question of whose prosperity it was. To be loved around the world as a beautiful place, while protecting the land and communities that support that beauty. Hawaii is still searching for a balance between those two things. From the late 1960s through the 1970s, a broad movement to revive Hawaiian culture gathered strength. It became known as the Hawaiian Renaissance. Younger generations of native Hawaiians sought to relearn their language, history, music, navigation, agriculture, religion, and relationship with the land. The history of the kingdom and the circumstances of the overthrow and annexation, which had long received too little attention in schools, began to be told again. Musicians composed songs in Hawaiian, and cultural practitioners studied old chants and hula. Scholars returned to the enormous body of Hawaiian language newspapers. Knowledge that had survived within families returned to public life. One event that symbolized this cultural revival was the construction and voyage of the voyaging canoe Hokulea. In 1976, Hokulea reached Tahiti from Hawaii, using traditional star navigation, without relying on modern navigational instruments. The knowledge and guidance of the Micronesian navigator Mau Piailug played a decisive role in the voyage. Its success helped many people understand that ancient Polynesians had not drifted to the islands by accident, but had crossed the Pacific using highly developed knowledge. The ocean once again came to be seen not as something that separated people, but as the road of their ancestors. Cultural revival also led to the revival of the Hawaiian language. In 1978, the Hawaii State Constitution recognized Hawaiian as an official language of the state, alongside English. Symbolically, this carried great meaning, but simply declaring a language official does not increase the number of people who speak it in everyday life. Families and educators tried to create environments in which young children could grow up surrounded by Hawaiian. In the 1980s, Hawaiian language preschools, known as Punana Leo, began, and the movement later expanded into public school immersion education. A language that people had once been discouraged from speaking in school returned to the classroom as a language for learning mathematics, science, and history. Reviving a language does not simply mean preserving words from the past. It means restoring it as a living language in which children can laugh, ask questions, argue, and speak about their dreams. Native Hawaiians are not the only people who study Hawaiian. People of many backgrounds who live on the islands also learn it in order to deepen their understanding of the land. When the language returns, the meanings of place names return as well. Mountains and valleys begin to appear not as symbols on a map, but as places carrying stories. During the same period, movements to protect the land also grew stronger. On the island of Kaho'olawe, which had been used for military exercises, bombing had damaged both the natural environment and cultural sites. Activists repeatedly landed on the island, demanding an end to military use and the return of the land. Some were arrested, and some lost their lives at sea. The movement was not only about Kaho'olawe. To whom does the land belong? When it is used for the military, tourism, or development, who will protect the ancestral places and natural world that remain there? These questions spread throughout Hawaii. Live fire training on Kaho'olawe was eventually stopped, and the island was returned to the state of Hawaii. But the removal of unexploded ordnance and the restoration of the environment continue even now as long-term work. The constitutional amendments of 1978 created the Office of Hawaiian Affairs as an agency responsible for managing interests connected to lands and assets held for Hawaiians. These institutions did not solve every problem, but the movement to speak again in public about culture, land, and political rights could no longer be reversed. In 1993, 100 years after the overthrow of the monarchy, the United States Congress passed what is commonly called the Apology Resolution. It was Public Law 103-150, signed by President Clinton. The resolution acknowledged that agents and citizens of the United States had participated in the overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom, and that the native Hawaiian people had never directly relinquished their claims to sovereignty over their national lands. It expressed an apology to native Hawaiians. The resolution did not, however, immediately restore an independent nation or return all land at once. There are also differing interpretations of the extent of its legal effect. Those seeking independence regard the resolution as important evidence that the United States government itself acknowledged the injustice of the overthrow. Those seeking solutions within federal and state institutions see it as a foundation for improving Native Hawaiian education, healthcare, housing, land rights, and self-government. Within modern sovereignty movements, some people organize their understanding of Hawaiian history around the position that the kingdom's sovereignty continues to exist legally in the present. That claim is one perspective found within the modern movement to restore sovereignty. But not all native Hawaiians hold the same political position. Multiple voices continue to exist concerning Hawaii's future. After traveling through so much time, we can see that Hawaiian history is not a simple story of paradise. The first voyagers read the stars and waves and reached distant islands. Their descendants managed the land from the mountains to the sea as a single living region, building taro fields and fish ponds. Chiefs competed for power, and Kamehameha I united the islands. The kingdom created constitutions, signed treaties with nations around the world, and was recognized as an independent state. Missionaries brought writing and schools, while also becoming a force that suppressed traditional culture. Foreign diseases took many lives. Whaling and sugar transformed the economy, and immigrants came from Asia, Europe, and many parts of the Pacific. A multi-ethnic society emerged, while native Hawaiians lost land and political power. The monarchy was overthrown in 1893, and Hawaii was annexed by the United States in 1898. The attack on Pearl Harbor placed the islands at the center of a world war. In 1959, Hawaii became an American state, and after that, movements continued to reclaim the language, navigational knowledge, hula, responsibility toward the land, and memories of the kingdom. History is not something sealed away in the past. The past remains in today's streets, land prices, languages used in schools, military bases, tourism, and political movements. A visitor to Hawaii may be captivated by the beauty of the sea, but when you stand on that shore and understand that it is someone's home, a place layered with ancestral memory, the landscape begins to look a little different. Beneath the hotels of Waikiki lies the history of former wetlands and farmland. On the quiet surface of Pearl Harbor rests the memory of war. Within the beautiful rooms of Iolani Palace are the pride of an independent kingdom and the sorrow of a queen held in confinement. In the old stone walls of Kauai are the skills of the people who built them and the legends of the Menehune. In the lava of the island of Hawaii is the continuing time of volcanoes still creating land. In the dry earth of Kahualave are the wounds of military use and the efforts of people seeking to restore the land. In the sails of Hokulea is the hope of carrying ancestral navigation into the future. Many different eras overlap within a single place. The bright Hawaii seen by tourists is certainly one part of Hawaii, but behind it is the everyday life of people who know the long history, care for the land, and continue to speak the language. The word aloha is known as a way of saying hello and goodbye, but its meaning is more than a simple greeting. Love, compassion, being together, and sharing life. Depending on the context, it can carry many layers of depth. The phrase malama aina expresses the act of caring for and protecting the land. It means more than preserving beautiful scenery. It is a responsibility to carry water, ocean, farmland, burial grounds, language, family, and community into the future. Throughout Hawaiian history, the view of land as a commodity held by outsiders repeatedly collided with the view of land as a relative. That conflict has still not completely ended. Housing development, tourist facilities, military use, observatories, renewable energy, agriculture, and the distribution of water. Many modern questions lead back to the issue of which land is used, by whom, and for what purpose. Knowing history does not mean rushing to choose one answer over another. Why is this place important? Why do people raise their voices so strongly? It means slowly understanding the history behind those feelings. For a long time, the era of the Hawaiian Kingdom was sometimes treated as a small part of histories told from outside. It was sometimes described briefly, almost as though Kamehameha I united the islands and Hawaii soon afterward became part of the United States. In reality, the Hawaiian Kingdom existed for more than 80 years, from unification in 1810 until the overthrow in 1893. During that time, several constitutions were established. The legislature met, courts functioned, and diplomats were sent overseas. Ships of other nations recognized the Hawaiian flag, passports of the kingdom were issued, and mail was carried. Citizens of the kingdom were not only native Hawaiians. People who came from foreign countries and became naturalized also lived as Hawaiian nationals. 19th century Hawaii was an international society in which ethnicity and nationality were not necessarily the same thing. For that reason, the overthrow of the monarchy was not merely a matter concerning one royal family. It is a question of how a nation with citizens and laws was lost amid economic pressure and foreign power. At the same time, we do not need to imagine that the kingdom was a completely ideal society. It contained inequalities of rank, confusion over land systems, disease, economic dependence, and political conflict. Valuing history does not mean making the past perfect. It means looking at it while allowing it to remain complex. The same is true of Hawaii's multi-ethnic society. Laborers who came from Japan, China, the Philippines, Portugal, Korea, Puerto Rico, and elsewhere built new lives under difficult conditions. Their descendants have supported Hawaii's politics, education, medicine, arts, food, and sports. Their cultures blended together, creating ways of life found only in Hawaii. A plate lunch with rice, macaroni salad, and a meat dish side by side also recalls the overlapping food cultures of the plantation era. Bond dances, Lunar New Year, Filipino festivals, sweetbread of Portuguese origin, and the ukulele. The ukulele is said to have developed in Hawaii under the influence of small stringed instruments brought by Portuguese immigrants in the 19th century. Each culture was not simply preserved unchanged, but transformed within island life. At the same time, the word multicultural must not be allowed to make indigenous history invisible. Not every culture arrived in Hawaii under the same conditions. Native Hawaiians lost the majority of their population on their own land, lost their nation, and saw their language weakened. The hardships of immigrants and the losses of an indigenous people should not be set against each other in competition. Understanding both makes present-day Hawaiian society appear in greater depth. In Hawaii today, old and new exist together every day. Cars travel along highways, while old fish ponds lie just beyond them. Young people holding smartphones learn chants from their grandparents. In university research rooms, Hawaiian language newspapers are being digitized. Near tourist hotels, people are restoring taro fields. Across seas traveled by ships equipped with modern navigation, canoes continue to sail as their crews learn traditional wayfinding. At Iolani Palace, visitors learn the history of the kingdom. In schools, some children receive their entire education in the Hawaiian language. Some people raise the flag of the kingdom and call for independence. Others work within state and federal institutions to improve education and housing. Environmental protection, cultural preservation, the economy, the cost of living, the military, and security. None of these questions has an easy answer. But knowing history allows us to understand where the voices of the present have come from. Why is the year 1893 still spoken of today? Why does the word Aina mean more than land? Why is each Hawaiian place name so important? Little by little, the reasons come into view. Now, let us look a little more slowly at each of the islands. The Hawaiian Islands are called by a single name, but each island has its own landscape and history. Kauai is one of the oldest of the main islands. Long erosion has carved deep valleys and sharp ridges into the land, and the great cliffs of the Nepali coast extend along the northwest. The center of the island contains rainy highlands, and water flowing from them has nourished the valleys. Kauai is also the island that resisted Kamehameha I's military expeditions, and remained under an independent king until the end of the unification process. When King Kaumu-Ali'i joined the unified kingdom through negotiation in 1810, that long process was completed. The history of Kauai contains memories of political judgment used to avoid war, and of a small kingdom facing a greater power. Oahu, home today to the state capital of Honolulu, is the political and economic center of Hawaii. In earlier times, however, it was an island contested by powerful chiefs because of its fertile land and rich fishing grounds. Mountain ranges rise through the center of the island. The windward side receives abundant rain, while comparatively dry lands spread across the leeward side. Nu'uanu Pass forms a route between the Honolulu side and the windward side, and it was also the setting of the battle in 1795. Pearl Harbor, Iolani Palace, Waikiki, old fish ponds, military bases, and highways. Within the single island of Oahu, the times of the kingdom, war, tourism, and the modern city all overlap. Molokai is often described as a quiet island. Extremely high sea cliffs extend along its northern coast, and below them lies the Kalaupapa Peninsula. This was the place where people diagnosed with Hansen's disease were isolated for many years. When we speak of Kalaupapa, we must remember not only the devotion of religious figures who helped the patients, but also the experiences of those who were separated from their families against their will. The people who were isolated there were not merely helpless figures waiting to be saved. They formed a community, worked, thought of their families, made music, and built lives of their own. Lanai had a small population for many years, but in the 20th century, vast pineapple plantations transformed its landscape and economy. Kahualave is a dry island, and it was damaged by many years of military exercises. Yet, during the era of cultural revival, it became a symbol of the movement to reclaim the land. Even the smaller islands have histories distinct from one another. They may appear close together on a map, but winds and waves in the channels can be powerful, and travel from island to island required knowledge and preparation. To people of earlier times, each island was both a world of its own and part of a region connected by canoes. Maui was formed where two large volcanic regions joined together. Deep valleys cut through the mountains of West Maui, while the great volcano, Haleakala, rises in the east. Yao Valley is a green valley shaped by rain and flowing water. That beautiful valley also carries the heavy history of the Battle of Kepaniwai in 1790. Lahaina, once a capital of the kingdom, became an international port during the whaling era. Royal family members, missionaries, sailors, merchants, and local residents met within the same small town. The destruction caused by the Great Lahaina Fire of 2023 reminded many people that even historic places are not guaranteed to survive forever. Not only old buildings, but family memories, burial grounds, churches, businesses, and community connections were damaged. When considering recovery, it is important to ask not only how to rebuild a tourist destination, but whether the people who have called it home can return and continue living there. Hawaiian history is not only the distant past. New pages continue to be written through changes in nature and the environment, including volcanoes, tsunamis, storms, drought, and fire. The island of Hawaii is the youngest and largest of the main islands. It has been shaped by volcanoes including Mauna Kea, Mauna Loa, Hualalai, Kohala, and Kilauea. Mauna Kea rises extremely high above sea level, and measured from the ocean floor, it is one of the greatest mountains in the world. Mauna Loa is known as an enormous volcano by volume. At Kilauea, eruptions sometimes destroy homes and roads, while at the same time creating new land that extends toward the sea. The creation of Hawaii is not an event that ended long ago. Black lava cools and cracks, and little by little, plants take root upon it. Wind carries seeds, birds arrive, and over a long period, forests begin to form. The time of the land, vastly longer than human history, continues before our eyes. The Kohala region of the island of Hawaii is deeply connected with Kamehameha I. Kealakekua Bay on the western coast became the final place in the life of Cook. Hilo developed as a rainy town on the eastern side and has endured repeated experiences with tsunamis. Even on the same island, climate, vegetation, and ways of life differ greatly between windward and leeward regions, and between the highlands and the coast. Perhaps this diversity made systems of land management connecting mountain to sea, such as the ahupua'a, so necessary. The traditional Hawaiian year contained seasons for work and ceremony. During the Makahiki season, associated with the god Lono, warfare ceased, and harvest and abundance were celebrated. Tribute was gathered for the chiefs, and competitions and dances were held. Running, wrestling resembling sumo, spear throwing, sledding, and surfing. Athletic contests were both forms of enjoyment and opportunities to display skill and status. Surfing is called hei nalu in Hawaiian. Wooden boards differed in shape and length according to the rank of the rider and the way they were to be used. Reading the ocean swell and setting the board in motion at the moment a wave rose required not only physical strength, but an understanding of the sea. Surfing, which later spread around the world, did not suddenly appear as a form of modern recreation. It is connected to the long maritime cultures of Hawaii and Polynesia. Surfing declined during parts of the missionary era and amid changes in society, but it was never completely lost. In the early 20th century, Hawaiian swimmers, such as Duke Kahanamoku, introduced surfing in many parts of the world. Surfing later became a global culture, but when speaking of its origins, it is important to remember the history of Hawaii's ocean and its people. Hula, too, is a culture that cannot be understood through its visible movements alone. The movements of the hands, the steps of the feet, the direction of the gaze, and the posture of the body. All of these exist to express through the body the words of songs and chants. Wind, rain, flowers, birds, the sea, a loved one, a chief, the gods, and events in history. A single movement may represent a word or a place. A place where hula is studied is called a halau. Under a teacher known as a kumu hula, students learn not only dance but also language, manners, history, and the proper handling of plants. Even when gathering plants, there is an understanding that one should ask permission and take only what is needed. A lei is also more than a decoration, welcoming someone, celebrating, expressing sadness at parting, and showing respect. Its meaning changes according to the flowers and leaves used, the way they are woven, and the occasion on which it is given. In tourist photographs, both hula and lei appear as bright symbols, but behind them lies the act of receiving materials from the land and passing language and memory from one person to another. The revival of hula through the cultural renaissance was more than the return of a dance. It was also a way of reclaiming Hawaiian language, history, and the relationship with the land through the body. Let us listen a little more closely to the written culture that developed in the 19th century kingdom. Once printing presses were introduced, Hawaiian language newspapers appeared, one after another. Their pages contained the laws of the kingdom, foreign news, agricultural knowledge, letters from readers, genealogies, myths, songs, and political debate. Newspapers did more than deliver information from overseas. They were places where Hawaiian people discussed the world in their own language. Citizens of the kingdom read about the legislature and treaties, sent in their opinions, and participated in politics. In later years, as English-centered education advanced, many Hawaiian language newspapers became difficult for people to read. But their pages remained. They contain perspectives that cannot be seen in records written only in English. Anger over the overthrow of the monarchy, anxiety about losing land, curiosity about events in foreign countries, small pieces of news from families and communities. As modern researchers and students read those newspapers again, the voices of people from the past can be heard after a long silence. Historical sources are not limited to official documents written by kings and presidents. Even a short letter sent to a newspaper by an ordinary person preserves the breath of an era. Let us also quietly imagine the diplomacy of the Hawaiian kingdom. Foreign ships entered Honolulu harbor, and consulates were established there. Envoys of the kingdom crossed the ocean to the United States and Europe. They explained that Hawaii was not an ownerless land waiting for someone to claim it, but an independent nation with a government and a people. The joint recognition of independence by Britain and France in 1843 was a major achievement of those diplomatic efforts. Afterward, the kingdom continued to enter into agreements concerning trade, postal service, and friendship with many countries. It established treaty relations with Japan in 1871. When King Kalakaua visited Japan in 1881, he met Emperor Meiji. How did these two monarchies in the Pacific regard each other in a world where the influence of Western powers was growing stronger? Their meeting must have contained both diplomatic hopes and anxieties. The Hawaiian Kingdom was a small country, but it was not an isolated society, ignorant of the outside world. It observed world politics, entered into treaties, adopted new technologies, and searched for a way to preserve its independence. For that reason, the end of the kingdom was not the natural disappearance of an old society that had failed to modernize. It was the overthrow of a country functioning as a modern state, amid relationships of economic, military, and political power. The queens and princesses of the kingdom also left a deep legacy in education and public welfare. Queen Emma, the wife of Kamehameha IV, supported the establishment of a hospital together with her husband. She is said to have personally gone out to seek donations in an effort to protect the health of the people. After losing her young prince and then her husband, she also became a candidate in an election for the throne. She lost the election to Kalakaua, but support for Queen Emma remained strong, and political divisions within the kingdom became visible. Bernice Paoahi Bishop was a high-ranking woman connected to the Kamehameha royal line. She inherited extensive lands and left her estate for the education of native Hawaiians. From that legacy, Kamehameha Schools was established. Queen Liliuokalani also left a trust to support children. Even after the monarchy was lost, portions of royal land and property continued to support later generations through hospitals, schools, and welfare institutions. At the same time, debate continues over who should benefit from these institutions and how they should be administered. These legacies do more than commemorate the past. They remain living systems connected to education and daily life in the present. The history of Japanese immigrants who came to the plantations created a deep connection between Hawaii and Japan. Among the earliest were people who crossed the ocean in 1868, the first year of the Meiji era, and became known as the Ganen Mono, the first-year people. Later, government-sponsored immigrants arrived in increasing numbers, under agreements between the Hawaiian Kingdom and the Japanese government. Plantation life was harsh, and people had complaints concerning contracts, wages, housing, and supervision. Even so, they established Buddhist temples, Shinto shrines, Japanese language schools, shops, newspapers, and mutual aid organizations. Women who traveled as picture brides chose marriage partners through photographs and letters, and built families on distant islands. Their children heard Japanese at home, while speaking English or Pidgin at school and with friends. As the generations passed, feelings toward Japan overlapped with a sense that Hawaii was home. The attack on Pearl Harbor placed these people in an extremely painful position. They had cultural ties to Japan, yet their loyalty as American citizens was questioned. After the war, Japanese Americans played major roles in politics, commerce, education, and many other fields. But alongside stories of success remain memories of plantation labor, discrimination, incarceration, and language lost within families. Hawaii's Japanese American community is not simply a piece of Japan preserved unchanged outside Japan. It is a distinct society born within Hawaiian history. People of Chinese, Portuguese, Filipino, Korean, and Puerto Rican ancestry also have their own different stories of migration. Some left the plantations when their contracts ended and opened small shops. Some became craftspeople in town, while others leased farmland and grew crops. Portuguese immigrants came from places including Madeira and the Azores. The small stringed instruments they brought changed in Hawaii and came to be loved as the ukulele. Workers from the Philippines increased in number in the early 20th century, supporting plantation labor and the island society that followed. The Chinese population had grown since the middle of the 19th century and expanded into commerce and agriculture. Different groups sometimes faced prejudice and sometimes regarded one another with suspicion. But through plantations, schools, workplaces, neighborhoods, and marriage, boundaries gradually changed. In Hawaii today, it is not unusual for one person to have several different ancestral backgrounds. Food from many regions may appear on the family table, while several holidays and customs are carried forward. This blending is one of Hawaii's attractions. At the same time, understanding that this society was formed upon the homeland of native Hawaiians is necessary if all of these histories are to be respected. Let us look once more, a little more carefully, at the moment when the monarchy was overthrown. In January 1893, Honolulu was filled with tension. Supporters of the Queen's new constitution hoped that political rights taken from them would be restored. The opposition viewed the proposal as a threat to its own economic and political position. The Committee of Safety claimed that the Queen was attempting to start a revolution. The Queen's side was trying to revise the Constitution in response to petitions from the people. The American minister requested the landing of Marines. The troops did not directly attack the palace, but the presence of an armed foreign force nearby greatly altered the balance of power. The Queen restrained resistance, not simply because of weakness. She made a decision to avoid bloodshed among civilians and appeal to the justice of the American government. But that expectation was not fulfilled. If the event is described only by saying that the Queen abdicated and a republic was established, the pressure of military force and the opposition of the people disappear from view. At the same time, those who participated in the overthrow believed that they were protecting order and the economy. In history, we must distinguish between the words people use to justify their actions and the consequences those actions have for others. Quietly imagine, too, the people who signed the coup petitions. Petition sheets were carried from island to island. People gathered in meeting halls, homes, and churches. Those who could write signed their own names, while someone may have helped those who found writing difficult. A signature may look like one small line, but that line expressed the determination that their country must not be given away without their consent. The literacy and newspaper culture that had spread during the era of the kingdom were important here as well. People understood the meaning of politics, formed organizations, and petitioned the government. As a result, ratification of the Annexation Treaty was prevented. Because annexation was ultimately carried forward through a joint resolution, the petitions did not completely achieve their goal. Even so, when the long-forgotten signatures were rediscovered years later, they made clear once again that Native Hawaiians had not passively lost their country. Resistance does not take only the form of taking up weapons. Writing one's name, gathering together, speaking, and carrying documents to a distant government were also forms of resistance. Tourism during the territorial era was not as large from the beginning as it is today. Early travelers reached Hawaii after long journeys by ship. Hotels were built along the shore at Waikiki, and music and surfing welcomed the visitors. When ships entered the harbor, the sight of people carrying lei and musicians greeting passengers became a symbol of Hawaiian tourism. The tourism industry created opportunities to introduce Hawaiian culture to the world. It provided work for musicians, dancers, craftspeople, and guides. But the realities of history were sometimes hidden in order to match the image of a tropical paradise expected by travelers. The overthrow of the kingdom, land disputes, labor conflicts, poverty, and militarization did not appear in bright promotional photographs. Hawaiian music also changed into forms that were more approachable for tourists. The sounds of the steel guitar and ukulele spread around the world and influenced American popular music. Even as culture was commercialized, the creativity of musicians produced new forms of expression, responding to demand from outside while protecting meanings from within. That tension has continued into the present age of large-scale tourism. When the Hawaiian Renaissance spread, people were not simply trying to return an old culture unchanged to a museum. They wanted to make knowledge that had nearly been lost usable once again in present-day life. Restoring taro fields, repairing the stone walls of fish ponds, and growing traditional plants. Giving children Hawaiian names and using the language at home. Learning old songs and expressing new problems in songs written in Hawaiian. Calling for ancestral remains and cultural objects to be returned from museums to the communities where they belonged. When opposing land development, speaking not only of environmental protection, but also of the meaning of burial grounds and sacred places located there. Culture became not a reenactment of the past, but something that supported decisions in the present. The voyages of Hokulea did not end as a single experiment. New navigators were trained, connections with other Pacific islands deepened, and voyages were made around the world. Traditional knowledge does not need to be placed in opposition to modern science. It came to be respected as another system of knowledge, built through observation, memory, training, and cooperative work. The revival of the Hawaiian language also required long patience. The families who began the first language preschools had to create an environment from the ground up, without enough teaching materials or teachers. For young children to acquire the language naturally, adults had to express every part of daily life in Hawaiian. Meals, play, injuries, sleepiness, joy, and words used when correcting a child. Life cannot be lived using only formal words printed in textbooks. New scientific terms and words for modern society were also needed. The language community researched old vocabulary, created new expressions, and trained teachers. Paths also opened for students to receive higher education in Hawaiian at the university level. Even as revival has advanced, challenges involving the number of speakers and educational resources remain. In a society overwhelmingly dominated by English, children need connections among home, school, work, and media if they are to continue using Hawaiian. Even so, a new generation now jokes, conducts research, and raises children in a language once feared to be disappearing. This shows that the flow of history does not move in only one direction. Not everything that was lost can be brought back. But when people act with determination, a weakened language can once again speak about the future. Modern debates over sovereignty may be difficult to understand from the outside. independence, federal recognition, self-government, the return of land, trust assets, and relations with the state government. These ideas may appear similar, but they are different from one another. Some movements hold that the Hawaiian Kingdom continues to exist under international law. Some seek recognition as an indigenous government within the United States. Some people place concrete issues, land, water, housing, health, and education, ahead of political institutions. And not every native Hawaiian supports independence. Some families serve in the military, while others work for the state government. Some people do not feel that being American and being Hawaiian are identities in conflict. Others have a strong sense of themselves as citizens of the kingdom. Rather than deciding on a single correct answer from the outside, it is important to understand the history that gave rise to these different voices. What they share is the feeling that the events of 1893 and the losses of land and culture that followed have never been completely resolved. The wounds of history do not disappear merely because the past is understood. But without understanding the past, we cannot even understand why those wounds remain. When we speak of Hawaii, nature and history cannot be separated from one another. Volcanoes create islands, rain carves valleys, and the trade winds carry clouds. People shaped fields, built homes, and chose routes in response to that terrain. When mountain forests disappear, the flow of water changes. Plants and animals introduced from elsewhere have had a major impact on native ecosystems. Plantations covered broad areas with a single crop and diverted water from one region to another. Tourism development altered coastlines, while military facilities restricted access. Today, sea level rise, coastal erosion, intense heat, drought, wildfires, and other effects of climate change are also serious concerns. These are not only problems of nature. Which communities will receive funding? Who will be able to move to a safer place? How can culturally important coastlines and burial grounds be protected? Can people who lost land through history be protected from losing their homes once again through environmental change? Malama Aina is not merely a beautiful phrase from the past. It has become a question connected to modern policy and everyday life. There are also things that visitors to the islands can do. Learn the names of places with care. Do not enter restricted areas merely to take a photograph. Do not treat cultural places only as scenery in the background. Understand that water and natural resources are limited. Listen to the history told by people in the community. Hawaii is not a stage that anyone is free to consume without thought. People live there. Ancestors are buried there. Schools there are raising children. Receiving aloha does not mean assuming that one has a right to be welcomed with a smile. It means accepting one's own responsibility to respect both the people and the land. When you look at the sea after learning its history, the beauty of the waves does not disappear. Instead, when you understand that generations of people crossed that sea, found food in it, prayed beside it, fought upon it, said farewell across it, and returned over it, the landscape may gain even greater depth. Things that could not be seen through the word paradise alone begin to appear quietly. One movement appears again and again Throughout Hawaiian history, even when great changes arrived from outside, people did not merely accept them, but tried to reshape them in forms of their own. Writing spread with the missionaries, but Hawaiian people used it to record their own genealogies and politics. When foreign instruments arrived, distinctive Hawaiian music was born. When many immigrants came to the plantations, new languages, foods, and families emerged. When English-centered education weakened the Hawaiian language, later generations built preschools and schools to bring it back. When navigational knowledge was nearly lost, people learned from knowledge that survived on other Pacific islands and returned canoes to the sea. When land was damaged by military use, people landed upon it and demanded its return. This is not a story in which everything was restored, exactly as it had been. Lost lives, land, and institutions do not return easily. Even so, it is certain that people deprived of power through history continued to take part in shaping their own future through voice, language, song, education, navigation, law, and protest. Within the word Hawaii, different meanings overlap: a state, an island, a kingdom, a home, and an ancestral land. When a traveler says Hawaii, that person may be thinking of a place for a vacation. On a map of the United States, it appears as the 50th state. For some Native Hawaiians, it means a nation whose sovereignty was taken away. For others, it is an island home where families of many different ancestries have lived. Even when the same word is spoken, what appears in the heart differs from one listener to another. History can be brought together into one narrative, but it cannot be brought together into one emotion. Joy and sorrow, pride and anger, the hopes of immigrants, and the losses of an indigenous people, celebration of statehood, and mourning for the kingdom. When we recognize that all of these can exist at the same time, Hawaiian history comes into view in a more honest form, and there is no need to hurry to resolve that complexity. Tonight, let us simply remember that many different voices exist within the same island wind. And now, let us once again remember the first voyagers, the people who guided their canoes forward, believing that an island lay beyond the horizon. They did not know everything the future would bring. They did not know that the islands would one day become a single kingdom. They did not know that ships would arrive from distant Europe. They did not know that disease would take so many lives. They did not know that immigrants would come from around the world. They did not know that electric lights would glow inside a royal palace, and that a queen would later be imprisoned within that same palace. They did not know that Pearl Harbor would become a place where a world war began. They did not know that large passenger planes would cross the sky every day. They did not know that a canoe carrying revived ancestral navigation would one day set out for Tahiti again. They knew none of these things. They simply read the stars, read the wind, and traveled across the sea. Since that first voyage, the Hawaiian people have faced great changes again and again. At times, they were pressed by forces arriving from outside. At times, they struggled among themselves. Some things were lost, and some things were reclaimed. And history has not yet ended. Tonight's story contained bright moments and heavy ones. Voyages across the vast ocean, water flowing through taro fields, the birth of a kingdom, constitutions and diplomacy, music and hula, and epidemics, the loss of land, the overthrow of the monarchy, and war. But you do not need to keep thinking about all of them now. It is all right to let the names and dates quietly go. Kamehameha, Ka'ahumanu, Kamehameha III, Kalakaua, Liliuokalani. One by one, the names slowly drift away, like the sound of waves in the distance. What remains is the Pacific Ocean at night, a single canoe moving beneath the stars. Far away, there is still only the faint outline of a small island. Clouds rest upon the mountains, and waves reach the shore. No one there yet knows the long history that is about to begin. There are only the sea, the wind, the stars, and the people. Please allow yourself to rest slowly as you picture that quiet landscape. You do not need to follow the story any further. If the voice grows distant and the outlines of the words become indistinct, that is perfectly all right. The Hawaiian Islands are floating upon the ocean of a long night. Gentle rain is falling on the slopes of ancient volcanoes. Leaves in the forest are moving in the wind. Along the shore, the same waves quietly arrive and withdraw, again and again. The age of kings, the age of sailing ships, the age of sugar plantations, and the age of war have all passed. But the ocean still surrounds the islands, and the stars still rise above the navigators. And people are still there, caring for the land, passing on the language, and telling the stories. Tonight, there is no longer any need to hurry. Until the next wave reaches the shore, try taking a slow breath. And as that wave quietly draws back, allow today's thoughts to drift, little by little, into the distance as well. Good night.